Now back to the show. This is The Law Show on CL 650.
Welcome back to the program. Good to have you with us this morning. Our guests from MurphyBattista, LLP are lawyers Scott Stanley and Stephen Gibson. And we're talking personal injury law. We were talking about, well, MurphyBattista, Scott, you were mentioning, in many ways, kind of a victim of your own success, in as much as you have, as you've identified already, won some pretty big cases and settlements for British Columbians over the years. And so people go, well, they do that for those people, they can sure do it for me. And they show up with dollar signs in their eyes. And that's perhaps not the best way to approach a law firm, is it?
No, that's not the kind of client we're looking for. We're looking for someone who wants help to get better, firstly. And I mean, anyone that's got dollar signs in their eyes has really got the whole process wrong. What you want is you want your life back. And you know, there's some people we can kind of steer away from that. We can kind of correct their behavior.
Sure.
But some you can't, and those aren't going to be clients of MurphyBattista.
Right. And Steve, I suppose the other issue is because you are becoming as well known as you are, I guess, and a fairly legitimate question again to ask while searching around for the right lawyer for me is, you guys are awfully busy and popular. Would you have time to take on my case?
Of course, yeah. No, we suggested that would be a good topic to talk about because there are many law firms out there that, you know, we don't like to use the word mill, but when lawyers are handling hundreds and hundreds of cases at a time on their own, you just simply cannot give the attention to an individual client that they need. And you can miss very key facts that can change the entire complexion of a case when you're overburdened with too many clients. So you really, that's a key question to ask, is whether you have the resources available to help investigate a claim properly and support the process that you have to go through.
Scott?
The lawyer will always say, yes, I have the resources to look after your claim.
Yes.
But the reality of it is the best knee surgeon in the world is not someone you're going to get in to see next week.
Definitely.
And I think I like to look at numbers. I think client or prospective clients should ask their lawyers, how many files do you have? And about 100 is the right number for a personal injury lawyer. That sounds like an enormous amount, but
it does.
Our cases take 4 or 5 years, so it's kind of like having 20 cases a year, which is a good model. But if you have anything more than that, you're really stretched. And there's some that are, you know, very good, successful lawyers. They have about 500 cases. And I think part of it, it's just the disease to please. It's hard to say no to nice people that need help. But you need to be fair with yourself, your family, and you need to be fair with your clients. And if you just don't have the time, you need to say no. Now, we tend to have a very boutique firm. We tend to look after the bigger, complex cases. But at the same time, we're not a firm that will ever say to anybody, look, your claim is too small for us to help you, right? But we really monitor the amount of work that our lawyers have.
I was just going to say, is there some kind of house policy, Steve, with respect to the caseload that each lawyer is allowed to carry and still service properly all of the clients involved?
Yeah, I mean, you know, you hear the figure of 100 or so cases for a file load. That's a reasonable sum that will allow you to give each individual file the correct attention that it needs. Sometimes it'll fluctuate a little bit higher, you know, a little bit lower. But, you know, and you can also, you know, we look at the complexity of the case, we evaluate the time that's going to be required on that file. So it's not just take a file, because, you know, a little whipper, as we so colloquially call them in ICBC terms, is a lot different from a quadriplegia or a traumatic brain injury case. So some involve, you know, a matter of months or, you know, up to a year. Some can go on for a decade or more. It really, you have to evaluate what's going to be needed in terms of resources when you take it on.
So the lawyers in our office that just do medical malpractice claims, they usually carry about 40 to 50 cases. Say 40 to 60 would be a better measure because they're more time intensive.
I was just going to say those are incredibly complicated cases, aren't they?
They're very complicated.
But you, both of you now have spoken already on the program to the length of time that MurphyBattista is quite prepared to devote to a specific case. For example, in the case of a child, this person really is not going to be legally in a position obligation to do anything, even to accept a settlement, until their 19th birthday. And if they're injured while they're in elementary school, that case is on the books for over a decade. So if a case goes on for more than a year, several years, Scott, that person, that injured person whose life has been completely disrupted, is eventually, unless they're extraordinarily well endowed, they're going to be kind of thin on the dollar side after not being able to work or provide for themselves after a couple of months, let alone a couple of years. So what happens to people caught in that trap?
Well, cash is king, right? And clients that they're not able to work, they will eventually fall under financial distress. Even if you get all their benefits up and running, it's usually not what they were earning before they were injured.
Sure, you get a fraction of what your salary was, those things, right?
Yeah, and that's why you need to prosecute these claims as quickly as you can, and that's why it's important to restrict your file load. I mean, clients that aren't well serviced will, there's these litigation lenders that they can get plugged into, and these are companies that lend against their claims, and the rates are, 25% that compound.
So that sounds like one of those tax return places where you go. No, I'm simplifying the example, but because I'm trying to wrap my head around it. I've never heard of these litigation loan people before. So if I go to the tax guy in the mall and I'm offered a rebate, he crunches the numbers, I'm getting some dough back. So they'll subtract a handsome percentage for their troubles and give me a check for the balance. Is that the same kind of mindset that these litigation loans people work?
Steve?
So, yeah, it's a little bit different than that. Really,
first of all, as a tax filer, I'm not a disadvantaged person, am I? I'm just a person just trying to get something done.
Yes,
quickly.
What we're seeing is that these are basically situations where people cannot go to their bank necessarily and get a massive loan to fund, their mortgage, all their bills, those kind of things.
Right.
When people are out of work, that's usually when it's the hardest to get loans from your banks. So where do they turn? Well, what we do, first of all, before you even start considering loans, we start looking at, well, what are the sources where people can get help, legitimate help, and they're entitled to it. There are things like directions to pay, where people can go to the therapist that they're dealing with and they can sign documents to say that they will get paid at the end of the case rather than up front. So that'll help the people preserve the resources. People can look into getting employment insurance. You can get medical employment insurance from the federal government.
Okay.
It's for a limited time period, a few months, but that can help at least.
It's a Band-Aid.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
If the disability is serious enough, you can qualify for CPP, like a disability pension.
Okay.
It has to be a serious injury to qualify. In the worst case scenarios, people can potentially qualify for social assistance. Now, your asset base has to be quite low to get that kind of a help. But another area where a lot of people that don't realize it is they can get assistance if they have private health insurance or private disability insurance through their employers.
Okay, the company benefits may kick in.
Always go to your human resources and ask what kind of benefits can be provided for, and that can help fund at least partially the income loss that you're missing. And then finally, you can go to ICBC and demand total disability benefits, TTDs we call them, and they're usually the last line of insurance that are paid, but again, areas where you can avoid getting high percentage loans if you pursue all these things first.
So these other, these alternate sources of revenue that you've just described, you're seeking them out and you're looking to establish them while your case is still being heard. And in many cases, Steve, that's going to take some time.
Yes, yeah. And even where people come to us that have on these high percentage litigation loans, we can actually try to source out areas where they can get lower loan rates, significantly lower loan rates, and that can save them a lot of money in the long run.
This litigation loan industry, it's an industry where they've got, some of their members have got some serious branding issues.
Okay.
When I receive an email from a company named after a large stampeding animal wanting to solicit me for business, I don't feel warm and fuzzy sending people there. I think they're going to get trampled.
Okay.
I mean, my response was, like, I think most of my I sent an email back and I think, look, I think most of my clients would prefer to sell organs after letting a blind monkey remove it with a dull spoon and only using Tic Tacs for pain control. I think they actually
just a bit of distaste for the whole thing. There, Scott.
I don't get emails from that company anymore.
I imagine you're off their good guy list. That's very funny, but it's not because these people are preying on people at their most vulnerable moments. They're exposed, they're unemployed, they're hurt, they're injured, they're going through all sorts of stress on multiple levels, and you've got no money. So, Steve, there they are with the checkbook, and gosh, we just can't do enough for you.
Well, that's a real danger when people are that vulnerable. They're easier to prey on. Well, I shouldn't say prey, but it's easier for insurance companies.
Prey.
It's easier for insurance companies to encourage settlement at that point.
Of course.
And it could be the worst thing that the person could be doing to compromise their claim at that point in time, but they might feel they have no other option. And so if people are feeling like that's the reason that they're settling, it's because they don't have the money to hold out.
Right.
If they haven't consulted a lawyer, they really should, because there are other options.
And you guys have both worked for insurance companies, or for firms who represented insurance companies, and that's exactly what they count on, isn't it, Scott? They just you're out of money, so you fold your hand and you throw your cards on the table.
They do. I mean, these loans are a time bomb. Once you light the fuse, it's just going to slowly it's going to explode somewhere. And these things accumulate like crazy. Like a $2,000 loan turns into $4,000 or $5,000 very quickly if it's a long. I mean, some claims are delayed, right?
Right.
I mean, the reality of it is that people in this situation, banks don't do this sort of lending, and you might go get a loan or 5, 6, 7% or something, which would probably be reasonable, 8% maybe, but then you go to these companies and there's 25%. There's really nothing in between. Now, I've looked into this, and these companies, they don't really prey on people. There's a gap. There's nothing in the market for them, right? And these people are distressed. The reality of it is these companies, these loans are not usurious. They are expensive, but they're expensive for a reason, because the cost of capital to these companies is about 15%. So by the time they add in a little bit of profit and some admin, it doesn't take long before they're over 20%. So yeah, people have to be very cautious. Lawyers should be very cautious about recommending these products to their clients.
Do people come to Murphy-Battista, Steve, who have already sort of signed on for some of these because they didn't know any better and they didn't have any dough, and life is just not the same anymore, and not likely to be the same for a good bloody long time too? So now I'm hooped. I'm signed up with these guys. What do I do now? And they sit across the desk from you with this look on their face like, now what?
Well, one of the first things I do is, if it's a case where I feel like I can give better service and do a better job, I think the first thing I'm doing is trying to find alternative sources to get out of that loan, pay it off.
Right, sure.
So it's like paying off credit cards.
Yep.
You don't save money in
but
the
even
bank.
higher interest rates than credit cards, if such a thing is imaginable.
Exactly. So you pay off that kind of debt first, get cheaper financing, and we're pretty good at sourcing that out.
There is one company, Bridgepoint Financial, which does this lending and lends at a reasonable rate. It's still high, but I think it's the lowest rate out there. So I've had some clients come to me locked into these really high, ridiculous rates.
Sure.
And Bridgepoint has been able to finance them at more reasonable, lower rates. Still high, but what I see is an appropriate level of interest.
So just another reason, friends, my goodness, as if being involved in an accident and trying to settle all of the details, and as Scott likes to say, just trying for Pete's sake to get your life back. And if in the process you've engaged one of these litigation loan companies, all the more reason to stop. Just stop and seek out a lawyer and sit down and find out where you are. And if you go to see the people at Murphy-Battista, two of whom are sitting in the room with me right now, keep in mind that first half hour, what the heck is going on in my life consultation is free. And if you don't need a lawyer, they'll be the first people to tell you. But if you do, or you even need some sense of direction, you'll be in the right place. MurphyBattista.com is the website. We're back with lots more on the Law Show right after this.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is The Law Show on CL 650.